Okay, Salwete and Miki. Hey, friends. So, the GOP Senate finally released the secretive version of the Obamacare replacement, repeal and replacement, various other names today. It released a 142-page document detailing their take on the Republican House bill. And as expected, it's just another version of Obamacare Light. It's a little less mean in some ways than the initial bill. For instance, it keeps some of the Obamacare subsidies to help people pay for individual coverage. But other than that, it still eliminates forcible taxes on small businesses and some of the other provisions that were in the House version of the bill. And the frustrating thing about this whole deal is that it's not a repealing of Obamacare. I mean, technically it is, but it's Obamacare Light, as people have been saying from the beginning. It's a half-assed measure that looks like Republicans are doing something to repeal Obamacare, but nobody likes it and nobody's buying it. And it's going to be if this thing passes, which it may not, because 4 Republican senators have already come out and said they will not support it. You know, our great and staunch libertarian crew, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Ron Johnson, and Mike Lee, have already said they're not going to support it. You know, Rand Paul's already been on TV saying it's Obamacare Light. You know, I ran for office and campaigned in 42 different states, he said, which is ironic considering he's a senator of Kentucky. But he makes a good argument. He campaigned, as did basically every single Republican member of the House and the Senate. They campaigned on repealing and getting rid of Obamacare, and the rhetoric they used to argue for it was one of principle, namely that government shouldn't pay for health care, that you, the taxpayer, should have no obligation to pay for a health service of your neighbor. And this is what the GOP always does. In election time, or when they're faced with an opposition, or when they're the party of opposition, as it were, when they don't own Congress, when they don't own the White House, they run on staunch conservative principles. And when they get elected, they become Democrat-like. That's where the derogatory term rhino comes from. Republican in name only. And doing this with healthcare, while claiming that they're repealing Obamacare, is not going to keep them in the House in 2018. It's not going to motivate conservatives and the Republican base to come out in droves with excitement and hope behind them to keep the Republicans in the House. Whereas Democrats, who will have been drumming up this Trump is a traitor, but we have to have the House and the Senate to impeach him because the Republicans aren't going to do it, blah, 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 blah. They're going to run on that. People are going to be motivated. I mean, just look at the special elections from Tuesday night. Jon Ossoff came pretty close in a very strongly, traditionally Republican district. And if they pass, if they continue with these half-ass measures, the Republican base is not going to be, one, it's not going to be happy, two, it's not going to be excited. And that's not good enough to beat the Democrats in 2018. And if the Democrats manage to win in 2018, God knows what's going to happen to the Trump presidency. So that leads to the question, what should Republicans actually do about healthcare? So I've complained about half measures this whole time. That's what everybody's been complaining about Obamacare Light. The Republicans' repealing of Obamacare. Well, I think there's only really two reasonable options. One, completely scrap it. Completely scrap the way we've been dealing with healthcare in the United States for the past 20 or 30 years, 50 years even. Completely start over and completely go in a market-based direction. That I would love that. The Libertarians would love that. But that's not a feasible option anymore in the current climate. No one's going to go for it. It's the same deal as trying to rework Social Security. It's an impossible political balloon. The other option, which makes me somewhat sick to my stomach, considering my general libertarian principles, is just go all the way in the other direction and create some form of nationalized healthcare and just get it over with and move on and focus on key areas of liberty that can be maintained and that are in a good stance, namely Second Amendment rights, freedom of speech, and other essential elements of a free state. But there's a certain reality that comes with having some kind of functional nationalized healthcare. Taxes have to be raised. One of Rand Paul's arguments is, how are we supposed to put forward this Obamacare Light when we're cutting taxes? It's just basic financial sense. If the government's going to spend more, you have to have more money to spend. The only way the government gets money to spend is through taxes. Either way, I don't think either one of these things are going to happen. Not with the Republicans. I think they're just going to keep putting forward half-ass measures that nobody likes, and it's probably going to cost the Republicans one of the houses of Congress by 2018, and then who knows what kind of shit show we're in for. Okay, guys, there you have it.